Now that we've talked about the function of emotions, I want to talk a little bit about the role your brain plays in producing emotions. This is going to be really important because I want you to first understand how your brain gets trained to work a certain way so that when we teach you the skills to retrain your brain, you're going to understand exactly what's happening in there that's making the difference and why the skills and practicing the skills is so important in making those changes. So as before, let's start with anxiety. Anxiety is made in the brain with two primary areas of the brain. One is called the amygdala and one is called the cortex. I don't want you to worry about remembering the names or anything. It's just helpful sometimes to know what they are and where they are. They're the two parts. So let's start with the amygdala. The amygdala is the part in your brain that is responsible for emotions, emotional memory, and then also survival. So this is where your fight or flight system lives in your brain. The way that amygdala works in producing anxiety is this. You receive a piece of information into your brain, and your brain decides this is a potential threat, and right away it sends that information to the amygdala. We're going to call this the low road, and the reason that we call it the low road is because it is short and sweet and to the point to set off fight or flight. There's not a lot of processing, there's not thinking that goes on in here. Something in your system detects threat, and you might not even be aware of what that is, but your brain decides potential threat, and it goes on the low road to set off fight or flight in your amygdala right away. This is really, really helpful because if there is actually a threat, you want to be able to respond really quickly without having to think to yourself like, should I be afraid of this big cat thing here that has the long, sharp teeth? You just want to be like reacting to the cat with the big sharp teeth without going through the thinking. And so that in that way, the low road can be really, really helpful. Now, as we talked about before, and sometimes our brain gets it wrong because that processing isn't happening here, sometimes those automatic, I feel anxious and I don't necessarily know why, kinds of reactions are not really doing us any favors. And so one of the things that we'll talk about in the workshop is how to kind of recognize when the low road is getting activated and how to calm your body down if there's not an identified threat. But again, we'll cover that in the workshop. The second part of the anxiety system that gets triggered is your cortex, or that gets utilized is your cortex. So the cortex we'll call the high road. This is the part of your brain where there's higher order thinking, things like problem solving, rational thought. It's the thinking part of our brain. When information comes into our brain and the cortex is utilized, what happens is this information gets passed up this way to the cortex, and that's where we interpret and think through the information. So as I was saying before, that is, there's a big cat. That big cat has big teeth. I bet those teeth could really hurt me. Oh man, that might be a mountain lion. I need to be worried. And then that information gets sent down to the amygdala, and then the fight or flight system goes off the same way as if it had just gone that way on the low road, okay? So with the cortex-based anxiety, the information comes in, it goes to the cortex for us to evaluate it and think through it. It takes a little bit longer than with the amygdala, so it's not as automatic, but then once that cortex decides, yes, there's a potential threat here, it sends that information down to the amygdala.